This is episode 316 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I'm pleased to be joined this week by Carri Phillis. She's a local businesswoman and was on the Governor's Economic Recovery Council. We're going to be talking about a wide variety of issues relating to her business as well as the Recovery Council here over the past year plus of the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Carri.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we've known each other for quite some time. Haven't talked to you, in person in a very long time, but you're a very busy woman, and that's in normal times. Now I can only imagine how busy you are because your business has been largely shut down for over a year, and you own a variety of, or a handful. I actually don't know how many businesses you own. Hopefully you do, but tell us a little bit about the businesses you do own.
Well, the one that actually just opened this weekend is Effects Nightclub that I opened in June of 2010. And that was my kind of kickoff point. I opened a couple little businesses in between here and there. I've done well and I've failed, just like any other business owner. Currently, I also have, we opened the Salt Yard on Osuna in January of 2019, and then the Salt Yard on Ellison in, July of 2019. And then we had started construction on a third location next to the airport, the old Rio Grande Yacht Club. And so we were doing another different type of venue that is similar to some things I've seen in other states. So I've kind of, after I left politics, which I was in for a number of years, I love Albuquerque. I love New Mexico. And I always was frustrated that we would travel to go have fun is what it kind of came down to. So I just wanted to bring cool locations and fun things to Albuquerque. And I'd love to see what's happening when you see the other places that have opened pre-pandemic, and so I love being part of making this a better place.
Excellent. Well, first and foremost, I guess I'll ask, who is this we you referred to? Because obviously any event center or business is a multi-person operation, but are you the head of a kind of holding company that manages these properties? Are you involved with other business owners and entrepreneurs? Describe just that general operation of a business.
Well, the first one, Effects, it's kind of silly. It seems like a lifetime ago, but my best friend and I, honestly, there were initially 3 of us. Now there's 2 of us. And it's so silly. We just thought it'd be a fun thing to do. And, almost 12 years later, we look at it and it's incredibly successful. And I'll give you an example. All of my employees came back after the pandemic. And I know I'm one of the few that happened, but every one of them came back. One of them did move away, but they all came back because they all make amazing money in this field. Most of them drive nicer cars than I do. And so that has been, his name's Bobby, the 2 of us for the last 12 years. When it comes to Salt Yard, we had actually formed, and I say we, it's myself, and initially it was Steve Cohen, a gentleman named Brian Terrell. We formed a company called Salt Hospitality. And initially it was going to be a restaurant group. And then as we started looking around, like I said, we go to Denver. My boyfriend and I go to Denver a lot. We're big hockey fans, so we spend a lot of time up there. And downtown Denver and just that entire area with revitalization that they have done is amazing. And so there are places that we would see there that I, would come back and I was like, man, we've got to have something like this. So it kind of turned from a restaurant group into an event group. And so we opened the first Salt Yard, weren't sure what to do. Albuquerque came in full force and it was amazing. And so then we went ahead and expanded to the west side, same thing. And then we were, like I said, starting to expand to the southeast side by the airport. And so yes, we have our hospitality group, but when it comes to operations, I am the operator. I'm the one that runs the day-to-day operations.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing all these lovely amenities to us. Now, Effects, being a nightclub, was definitely closed over the last year plus.
474 days, in case you're wondering.
Maybe you had a calendar on the wall or something. I don't know. But just talk about some of the challenges of that. And I know some of your other businesses were not closed.
No, they were all closed.
Oh, well, the entire time or
Yes.
just part? Okay.
So the salt yards have not reopened yet. One
Okay.
is opening this weekend, and the other one, I'm going to hold off just because I physically cannot do 3 businesses at once right now to reopen them.
Sure. Well, I'm sure you're looking for employees too, and definitely add that little wrinkle in as well, because being closed for so long is certainly a challenge, but also reopening when you have these very divergent economic policies with regard to $300 extra unemployment. Now we're throwing $1,000 to get a job. Just talk about that as well, but definitely the closure aspect first.
I mean, the closure was, to be frank, I never thought that it could actually happen. And I remember like it was yesterday when my attorney called and said that he'd gotten a letter regarding liquor licenses. And actually the first letter had come in on Thursday, March 12th, late night. And then another one came in Friday, March 13th, saying that we could not have DJ'd events and dancing. And the business owner in me was not okay with that. So I was trying to figure out what to do at that time. And I just couldn't in my brain comprehend that I could be told what to do as a business owner. And I was very naive at that. I mean, to be honest, looking back now. So then over the weekend, and I'm thankful for this because I was in politics before, and I do know quite a few people. I was able to talk to different people that were telling me what was coming. And so we went ahead and laid off all of our staff at all 3 locations on Monday. That was March 16th.
Okay.
So just before the actual closure was announced, because I wanted to get my people on unemployment as quickly as I could so that they could survive. Because in our industry, it is, a shift to shifts in some situations. A lot of them are putting themselves through school. A lot of them, I have a number of people that bartend or serve for me that are full-time moms that work 2 days a week and support their kids. So it was very important to me to make sure that they were going to be okay. And in my head, and I remember we had a managers meeting and I was like, it's not going to be more than 6 weeks, 6 weeks max. And so as time went on, I had a number of emotions. I'm a mom, and I'll be honest, I struggled with being a stay-at-home mom. It was not something I was used to, and I don't think my son was used to being with me that much either. So, and then the homeschooling aspect, that's kind of a side note, but it was, I knew that no matter what, I would be okay, my family would be okay, but it was the talking to my employees every day that I really struggled with, and the difficult time they had on getting unemployment.
Just the process.
Yeah. And it was, for being as difficult as it was, I'm honestly a little surprised at the amount of fraud that happened. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not part of that process. I also don't know what it's like to suddenly have 200,000 people apply for unemployment in a 2-week period. So absolutely. I'm not going to find fault there, but,
so let me ask you just to jump in about the physical, the buildings you're in, and how you would pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever, whatever financial obligations. I'm assuming you're making payments to somebody on a building that is not generating any revenue. And I know that everybody had different experiences, I'm sure, but was there kind of an understanding that, hey, we're not making money, can you help us out? How did that work out for your businesses?
I will tell you, I'm one of the lucky ones, hands down. It's been so long. I believe we paid for April because, again, we didn't think that this was going to last that long. I continued paying my liquor license as well. Thankfully, my landlord is actually one of my partners in one of the entities. And nice. So he knew, and he also oh my goodness, I'm making so much noise. I'm sorry. He also had a number of breweries and restaurants in other buildings. So he knew right away. And so we didn't have to continue to pay monthly, but that is absolutely, that has added up. And so that was something initially I was grateful for. You know, we had money in the bank, so we were able to continue to pay for a little bit. And then it was May that I was kind of like, well, you know, we're not going to be able to continue to pay, or there won't be anything. Right around there, the PPP came in, but you're dealing with a business that is tipped employees. And so our PPP was really not that much. And then we kind of sat on it because, you know, they bring it in and it's like, I was looking and by this point it was April 21st, the governor called and asked if I would be on our council. So I'm sitting on the council and I'm getting these briefings 3 times a week at this point. So I'm realizing we're not going to open. And I was like, so do I bring my employees back, pull them off of unemployment, pay them for 8 weeks, and then send them back to unemployment? So we held on to it for a while because I couldn't do that to them. I knew we weren't going to open. And so I wasn't going to put them through that and then have them not get back on unemployment. So the PPP meant nothing to me at that point.
Yeah.
EIDL came out in July, and that actually did help. We were able to...
EIDL,
it was the Economic Injury and Disaster Loan,
okay,
I believe.
That was also part of the original stimulus passed
Yes.
with Trump in charge, but it
Yes.
just took a little longer to get out. Okay.
And it was $150,000 at like 1% interest. I believe it was like half of prime.
Okay.
And it's I want to say it's a 30-year payback. So that is reasonable. You know, so that we were able to pay some of the things we needed to pay because we knew anything like our accountant, you know, we had to file our taxes to make sure that we could get loans or anything else at that point. But there was a point, I would say May or June, that it was the beginning of May, and we fully went in and just shut everything down. So any food that we had that was still going to give to staff, you know, if we had waters, there was toilet paper, sanitizer.
Oh, you could have sold that for a pretty penny there.
But we and then I also at the salt yard, I was able to do like Smith & Albertson's gift cards for my employees because I was really concerned that some of them would not be able to afford to eat. And that was more important to me than anything else, than paying rent, than doing anything else. That was my focus were my employees.
Now, sorry, I'm going to keep interrupting a
fine.
little bit just because I have pertinent questions here. But was there ever a contemplation of altering your business some way in order to fit in under the rules? And, you know, the rules were the rules, and we're going to talk about your work on the council. But, you know, for example, and this is another business that has nothing to do with you, to my knowledge, although you seem to have your finger in a lot of pies, Flick's Brew House. I thought to myself, man, these people are just, you know, a tiny step away from being a restaurant with a sports bar. Like, you know, change the movies to something on TV, and boom, you've got, I mean, it's already socially distanced if you've ever been into that kind of place. Was there ever a consideration of doing something like that with, I'm sorry, I'm past my night clubbing days. I definitely want to check out the salt yard and whatnot. And I know those were either open for a limit. They weren't open for long, if at all, before the pandemic. So I definitely want to check those out. But was there ever a consideration of trying to shoehorn your business to keep them open during that time period?
Look, hindsight's everything. Had I known it would be 15 months, I probably would have tried to figure something out. I will not speak on behalf of Flick's Brew House, but I will speak on behalf of those of us in an industry that was closed. Mm-hmm. There's a point that you have to sit down and look. And at least when we were closed, for the most part, everything was on hold. Our bills were on hold. Our debt was on hold to anybody. And all the vendors, you know, had a ton of grace in there. They could have all demanded their money, taken us to court. But everything was on hold. But you have to look at a P&L. Mm-hmm. and make that decision. And these were conversations I had on the council was, yes, absolutely. You know, the thing about the nightclub is the nightclub. That's neither here nor there. There's no way that I could have changed that and had people walk in the door. The salt yard was a little different, but with the rules being what they are, I have games that you play. You could not play games. You had to have food. Well, I didn't operate the food. I had vendors that operated my food. So when it came down to it, it was, and the vendors that I had are also all small business owners that had their other restaurants that they had to operate, and they lost people. So my vendors couldn't do my locations. I couldn't have games. And, it's like, so I would have no food, just alcohol. And could I have done it? Yes. But on the other hand, then I was just a straight bar. And it honestly, financially did not make sense. And that was a decision that we had to make. And I know other people, you're not the first person that has brought up Flick's Brewhouse to me, but you might have a percent of people that will go in and eat without watching a movie, or maybe go watch a sporting event. But that's not a lot of people. And you have to make that decision, a business decision. And I think that that's what, there were a lot of people that didn't understand some of the decisions that a lot of us made because of that. And so you'd hear, oh, they're never going to open again. And it was just flat out, I made a decision I would not reopen until all of the restrictions were lifted, because it wasn't worth the cost.
That's a fair assessment. And before we move on, I would like to talk to you briefly about your political involvement. Can you just describe what you've done in politics so people understand where you fall on the spectrum and your experience there?
I will tell you, I'm a walking oxymoron when it comes to myself politically. I worked for Heather Wilson, the member of Congress, for a number of years. In 2007, I was honestly kind of burnout. We had just gotten out of the most difficult race with Patricia Madrid. We had recounts. I spent my Thanksgiving at a ballot warehouse, things like that. And I was just like, man, I don't know if I can do this. And I was tired. So I left politics for a while and did a little bit of PR stuff, nothing major, just enough to pay bills. Then I jumped in and I did a few campaigns here and there. I did Dan East for Congress. He ran against Ben Ray Lujan the first time. And I think the last campaign I did was Doug Turner's, and which is where I got to know you. Yeah. And if you know any of the people that I work for, aside from Heather, I would say libertarian. They're more moderate when they come to things. It's stay out of my business, stay out of my room. How it's like my home, kind of like, freedom. And that's where I fall. I do have a social side. I went to school for social work, so there's a side of me that I would say I'm definitely more socially liberal for sure. But I will say, as a business owner, I'm absolutely more conservative. It's you have to look at things, and it took me a few years as a business owner to realize how much state and federal government really have to do with your business, and I really don't think they should. So I would definitely call myself a libertarian. I think right now I'm currently at like a declined estate, just because I'm frustrated with every party there is.
All right, well, that's a whole different episode we could go down and talk about, but it must have been, well, generally speaking, as a libertarian, a very tough year plus for somebody who doesn't believe in a lot of government involvement, because quite frankly, that was our organizationally biggest concern and frustration with the governor and her plans. And, I'll just put this out there, and you've probably followed us on social media and followed Heirs of Enchantment, but it's not that, in March of 2020, we were sitting there saying the government shouldn't do anything to respond to COVID-19. And we laid it out there very clearly initially that we put a website together called fairlyopen.com. And our whole thing was that all businesses should be treated the same and be able to innovate and come up with ways to socially distance and make sure that the virus did not spread within their walls. So, treat the Lowe's the same as the local nursery and kind of all across the board. But also to be very clear and transparent with the data and how the decisions are being made. Now, again, I don't think it's a shock to you, Carri, that we don't feel that worked out in terms of this particular governor. But I wanted to ask you that political question before we jump into the Economic Recovery Council. Was it something that you were surprised by when you were asked to be a part of this council? It certainly doesn't sound like you weren't writing campaign checks to Michelle Lujan Grisham. I mean, you don't have to answer that, but it doesn't sound like you and MLG were necessarily buddies, if you will, beforehand. So how did this develop that you wound up on this council?
So to go back, the governor and I have actually known each other for a number of years.
Okay.
I actually met her when bird flu happened. I was working for Congresswoman Wilson. She was, I think she was Secretary of Aging. She was a secretary at the time.
Okay.
And that is when we met initially.
Okay.
And I think that was 2003, 2004, right in there. And over the years, we have remained friendly. I love her to pieces as a human, and I will put that out there. As a human, she and I have always gotten along. We have not agreed politically, but I've been lucky enough to have a relationship with her that I can state my opinion or my feelings on things, and we can, in some cases, agree to disagree. I had not spoken to her at all since she became governor. Through the process, I did support her. I'm sure I'm going to offend people, but I was not a fan of the Republican running, and I could not support him because of reasons from years past that I dealt with him. And then
now Michelle was she was involved in the Johnson administration as well, and so it's not like she hasn't been involved, at least in some respects. And we all consider Gary a libertarian now, but at the time he was a Republican, and she was involved in his administration. So there has been that cross-pollination over time. So I appreciate your being upfront and honest about that, and that's totally understandable. I mean, you do have a personal relationship with her, even if you don't always. I'm going to make it eye to eye. You don't see eye to eye. No, very few people see eye to eye with her. Vertically challenged and all, but anyway, sorry.
Well, no, but I had not spoken with her. I did.
Okay,
I was
enough.
in contact with a couple of her staff because when I'm closing down, I'm like,
yeah, you're a business owner. You've got to be involved.
What's going on? And I don't usually call my political but at that point, I was like, I need to know what's happening. I have 300 people that rely on me, to support families. So when I got the call, it was fairly late and. Didn't recognize, the number, didn't answer. She left a message. I called her back, and I'm pretty sure I was like, "Are you sure?" Because if you know me at all, I am incredibly outspoken, and I will say what I think. It's sometimes to a fault. So going into it, I did not know what to expect. I was happy to be a part of it because. I love the industry I'm in, whether it's the restaurant side or bar side, it's the entire hospitality side. And I was happy to be a part of it. I was honored to be called. When I saw the list of names, I felt like I didn't belong at first. Everybody else had a lot more experience than I did. But when I got the call and I will tell you this, she didn't call me to agree with everything that was said. She would have called somebody else if that's what she wanted in that time. And it was definitely an honor to be called. I would do it again, even with all the frustration, because I do believe that I gave our industry a voice that was not heard prior to that. And even when I didn't win some battles that I wanted to win, I feel like I represented the industry well.
Now, you were the voice, if you will, of the hospitality industry on the Economic Recovery Council. There were people from various industries. I remember, Trevisani from the United soccer team. There were people from various other groups. I don't know if you want to mention any of them. I don't recall at this point. It's been a while. But kind of in summary, do you feel like the council made a difference in how the policies were implemented, and or how do you feel like kind of judge the overall approach that the council took with regards to what happened? I mean, obviously you said at the outset you didn't think this was going to be a 15-month kind of deal. So just talk about, overall the experience.
It was a learning experience. I will say that there was another gentleman who also was with hospitality on the hotel side.
Okay.
Alan Affelt from Las Vegas. He owns a couple of hotels up there. So initially, we all kind of came in and represented our own industry a little bit. And then as time went on, we teamed up in different ways to write COVID safe practices. And I very much believe that the council was able to bring some common sense on that side because we live this in real life. Whatever industry we're in, this is something that we do every day, and we know what is feasible and not feasible. As it went on, I mean, there were times that we disagreed, and there were times that we agreed. I learned a lot about other industries. We did have people from all over the state, and as we know, this affected people in different areas of the state. There was a woman, and I have a great deal of respect for I respect everybody that was on the council, but she brought a lot of the concerns to the table from the Native American community that I would not have been aware of had it not been for her. I think that sometimes I live in a bubble of Albuquerque, and so everybody was affected differently, and everybody in the council was affected in a different way. And we were able to bring those personal stories. I definitely, my industry is very different than any other industry. I don't know of any restaurant or bar that has money in the bank to last more than a few months. And so I often talk to business owners. I talked to, obviously, Carol with the Restaurant Association. During the process, we actually formed a bar, nightclub, and entertainment venue association because there was no representation there to fight for some of the issues that went along. And I think overall the council did make a difference. It's a difficult thing because it felt like you were either trying to save people's lives or save businesses is how it came across. And we know that politically across the nation, that's how it was. And I do think that there's, I would get focused on things when I would get calls from parents, even with kids in school whose kids were suicidal. And those are the times that I really struggled the most with, well, where do they, where do we put their lives? And I will say there was never a point that I made a call that somebody didn't answer my call so that I could have a conversation, ask questions, push an issue. And, honestly, wherever you stand, they didn't have to do that. The governor did not have to do that. She didn't have to have a council of business people because not every governor did. And, whether we agreed with the situation or not, we were heard. We were never shut down. And I do think that long term, you're going to see more of those effects from that. Not necessarily right in the moment, but I do think that we started and sparked some conversations about efficiency in government and some of the issues that happened. And those were conversations that we were able to have that I don't know that any of us would have been sitting at a table together discussing, how difficult it is to get permitting or, whatever it may be. But I think in the long run, yes, we made a difference, but I think it was very difficult to see in some ways. I can tell you, there are things that I fought very hard for. The LIDA loan that we got passed so that people could pay rent. That was my biggest fear. And that was one of the things that I was worried about is the largest amount of debt that people were coming out of was having to pay their rent or mortgage. And, I look back now and I will tell you that over the next few years, I want to really go to town on that anti-donation clause because I think it's ridiculous. But that has nothing to do with the governor. That has to do with the state legislature, because I think that there were more ways we could have helped businesses. But I was told that by more people in the legislative body. And I think that that's probably the biggest place that we failed.
Okay. Now, was the Recovery Council active throughout the last 15 or so months, or was there kind of an initial? I mean, there had to be at least some kind of initial intensity level there that maybe wasn't there a month ago or 2 months ago. You did issue a significant report relating to recommendations, and that's, I think, available. I'm trying to find it actually, but
The roadmap to recovery.
the roadmap, yeah. What was it? Kind of that initial drinking from a fire hose, and then kind of things got into a little bit more of a routine. Like how often were you meeting? Just talk about some of the logistics of the council.
Initially, we were meeting 3 times a week.
Via Zoom, presumably.
Oh yeah, all via Zoom, exactly. For the most part, most of us have never actually met in person, which is kind of, funny, because I can probably tell you more about their families than I can other people. So yeah, we were meeting initially 3 times a week. And then there were subcommittees that were formed to write COVID safe practices. And I mean, honestly, I can't tell you when the timeline happened and then it became twice a week or whatever, but for the majority, I would say the last probably 6 or 8 months, it's been once a week, or it had been once a week. We're done now, once a week. And then we had subcommittees. One of them was a subcommittee on business reopening. And that was a focus that we were able to give businesses who felt like they should be open during this time a chance to come to the table and tell us what they were doing. And then there was one that was solely focused on the legislative session, because I had a lot of bills that I thought should go through to help small businesses in our state. And I spoke a number of times last July and August in front of legislative councils, and I would not have had that opportunity had it not been for the Economic Recovery Council, I believe. So, there were different subcommittees on things, but yes, we ended up, the roadmap to recovery started, I believe, in September of last year. And, there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that. Do I think it was perfect in the end? No. It was a lot better than it started for our industry. And I'll only speak to the industry that I represented.
Because I really want to ask about, it seemed to really talk a lot about the film industry, which, again, if film comes here and does business in New Mexico, God bless them. But paying the kind of subsidies we are to them, I definitely remember reading through it and thinking, gosh, this is pretty much what the governor, to me, outside the process, I said, well, this is what the governor would want, because she's been such a supporter of more film subsidies and that kind of thing. And of course, a gentleman from NBC Universal was on the committee, and you can go to find out, newmexico.gov, April 23rd, 2020, governor appoints Economic Recovery Council. And sorry to interrupt, but there's Brian Moore. He's a conservative, former, was he a lieutenant governor? A
candidate for lieutenant governor.
Yeah,
he was a former state.
He lobbies with the county, but he's a conservative. Then there's a whole list, including, of course, Carri. But the NBC Universal had a seat on the council as well, and they put it to very good use in advocating really for the film subsidy. So, anything on your specific industry, though, you'd like to comment on relating to that?
Well, and I definitely, had you seen the roadmap to recovery, the first round versus where it got to, it's night and day. I can tell you that. Okay. And it is because there were a number of us that really did fight for industries that we think are important, that I think are incredibly important to the state. And, I can tell you one of my arguments was, without the hospitality industry, movies are not going to film here. I don't care what the subsidies are. If they don't have hotels that they want to stay in, places that they want to eat, entertainment venues to go to, they will fly in, do a movie, and fly back out. And that's the bottom line. And and I can tell you the places I own and the places my friends own, we get a lot of people from the movie industry that come in and patron us. And without us, it doesn't matter what the subsidies are. They will fly in, do the film, and fly right back out and not spend any money in this state. And I will stand by that, and I've argued that. I think that it's difficult when you have people who have not owned a business in positions to make decisions for businesses. And I struggled with that. And sometimes, I would go a little overboard. Sometimes I get a little frustrated and aggressive, but that was a huge thing. But I will say that there were times that I was just waiting to get kicked off. I would get really frustrated and say things, and I was like, oh man, that time.
Nobody left or got kicked off, though, to my knowledge.
No.
Okay.
It took a lot of our time for sure.
Sure.
But I think every one of us felt like we had to fight for our industry. And it wasn't, when I say fight for our industry, it wasn't, like we're fighting the big bad wolf. It was, you have people, the Secretary of Economic Development came from the movie industry. She's not familiar with my industry, which is fine. But then I felt it was my job to have those conversations and explain it. There were comments made, and these were different levels and not directly from anybody, just talking about how, well, in the restaurant industry, you just need to get your costs down. Well, that's easier said than done, in a state where our cost of rent is incredibly higher than most other states.
Really? Interesting.
And so there's...
Is that just a scarcity issue, or...
I don't know what it is. My brother is a city manager outside of Dallas, and I've gone down there and looked at real estate there, and it's night and day to Albuquerque. But same thing with the housing market. And so I don't know what the reason for that is, but I know, there's industry standards in our industry. And I finally one day did this P&L. I was like, well, if you have $100,000 a month gross that comes in, at the end of the month in the restaurant industry, you have about 2.5% to 3% left.
Right.
That's before you pay taxes. So then I did it at $50,000, same industry standards, and I was negative $12,000. And I actually had somebody say, "Well, wouldn't it be better to run in the red than to not operate at all?" And I was like, "Absolutely, if you want to pay that debt every month."
Right.
And so that's, I think that our industry is not understood a lot because they don't understand that. And so I was able to, I believe, educate on our industry. I thought that I had done a better job educating the state legislature, but I did not.
Right.
And so, there's nobody at the state level who's ever owned a business type like those of us who literally operate on a day-to-day P&L. So it's really difficult to explain the issues. I will say that I had the opportunity to have a meeting with Secretary Keyes, and I was very frustrated, express that frustration, and then that's where the LIDA grant came from, out of that meeting. And I have to give that credit to the state, that it wasn't like we came to them and said, here are the issues, again, with different industries, and they just absolutely turned a blind eye. Where things could be done and they could work with the state legislative body, we were able to get things passed. And even when it came to the first finance authority loan that started, I think they had released it back in August, and very few people had applied for it, given the way you had to apply and the parameters around it. The one that came out after the session, that it seemed like it was mirrored after LIDA after the EIDL has done a much better job. So they did hear concerns when there were concerns.
All right. Well, just, and I know the council was made up of all kinds of different voices, and some of those industries experienced very different things during the pandemic. Jason Sandell with, of course, representing the oil and gas industry, now out of the Four Corners, which is struggling relative to the southeastern oil and gas industry. So even that internally is different. But of course, they had their negative day back in April of 2020. But now oil and gas is booming quite a bit. So I can empathize with that intra-industry different approach on the council. But this is the closest I'm going to come to really trying to put you on the spot. Now, we obviously had a lot of frustrations with the governor and her broad approaches to the issue. We look at other states. We have the second highest unemployment rate in the country. The governor, at least in my estimation, really focus very heavily, often in contradictory ways, on addressing the virus. Sometimes, at least they were sensible, even if I disagreed with them. One that wasn't, in my book, sensible was the 75-person limit on big box stores back in November and December during the second lockdown.
Well, now, mind you, that some of that came from the council because of the overwhelming impact it was having on small businesses, and that when we sat at that table as the New Mexico Economic Recovery Council, I was more concerned about the small stores to surviving than I was the big box. And that's the truth. They're going to survive. Costco's going to survive. Walmart's going to survive. But when you come to the smaller towns, the smaller grocery stores, even the ones in our state who are abiding by the same rules, but it's 5 people in there versus, 200 people, that was something that it was like, and she got grief for it. People were like, "Oh, she doesn't care about small business." And
I will say that if I was among the ringleaders of the grief, I will gladly accept that label. And my point is, New Mexico was definitely among the most locked down states throughout. We could argue back and forth, and if she was sitting in the chair you are right now, I would point to the 13th highest death rates and, various issues, not to mention the economic, not to mention the kids being out of school. So the best you can and are willing to do, kind of overall look at, now that we're hopefully really behind this, although kids are still going to be wearing masks to school this fall unless something changes, which is infinitely frustrating to me as a parent. But that aside, we're more or less past this. The Economic Recovery Council is past this. Talk about the overall performance of New Mexico and the governor during this situation, understanding that you have some limitations there.
But I have an 8-year-old, and the day after his 7th birthday was when things started happening. He had his 7th birthday, and then he was at a private school, went into spring break. And then the lockdown
March
happened.
10th, his birthday?
March 7th.
7th,
and
okay.
so his birthday happened the weekend and then spring break.
Yeah.
So with one fell swoop, my 7-year-old lost access to grandparents, his school, sports, friends, everything, and was stuck with me. Because Blaine got to go to work every day because his industry boomed through this, which honestly made me mad. But
Blaine's
sorry,
your boyfriend?
he's my boyfriend. Yeah.
Okay. And what industry was he in?
He's in construction. He does low voltage,
Right.
so he
Okay,
does
fair enough.
security systems for home, home theater systems, smart home stuff like that.
That stuff definitely was booming.
Yes. So I watched as a mom, and this might make me emotional.
Okay.
My 7-year-old's personality change by being quarantined. And that was the hardest thing for me. And there was a point, absolutely, that I did not agree with it. And I've made no bones about it. He needed, and the thing that killed me, and I, argued this, is financially we are fine. We had the financial means that as soon as things opened, we ended up doing a homeschool pod in our living room. So he was able to go to school with his friends. My mother-in-law taught it. And we had the financial means. He had private swim lessons. He had ninja gym private lessons. He went to tennis lessons. So we were able to get him and this, his group of friends access to an incredible education and activities and sports. Where I think that we failed was for the children with lower income. My two nieces, one of which are autistic, were APS, and they really struggled this year with going to school online. And I don't know where that, I don't know what the right thing was to do. And even looking back, I can't look at it and say, oh, we should have done this way or should have done that. Because I don't know what would have happened. Because we are, yes, we're one of the poorest states. We also don't have amazing healthcare. There's a lot of things that could have happened that maybe didn't. And I don't know the answer to that. But I think that it definitely opened that divide between the classes. And that breaks my heart for people. The ones, we had friends that moved their kids to other states or rented a house in another state so they could go play that. But again, we all have the financial means to do those. The parents that didn't, that's where I think that there was failure. I don't know what could have been done different, but I don't think that keeping them out of school as long as they did, and APS tried to keep them out longer, right? I mean, you know, the governor wanted them to go back sooner, and the union with the APS didn't want them to. And I think that you fail children in that way. The mask thing, yeah, I have a really hard time with my child wearing a mask because that's when he coughed the most, was when he had a mask on. He struggled with a mask, and so I'm not a fan of that. As far as the Recovery Council, I mean, hindsight's everything. I could go back and say, man, I wish I would have said this then, or I wish that we would have done this, you know, at that point. And I think that, you know, there was a lot of unity with us towards the end that was not necessarily there in the beginning, because again, we were coming from different industries. Yeah. I probably, in some cases, had the biggest mouth, and I've said I'm incredibly outspoken, and I was through the whole thing. But, you know, I wish that I could look at you and say, man, had we opened on this date, this would have been great or whatever. Do I think we should have been closed as long as we have? No, I don't. And I never made any bones about it. It was a frustrating place to be in at the time, with having respect for my position and what I was there to represent, as well as, you know, balancing. I don't know what it's like to not have access to healthcare. I don't know what it's like to live in some other people's shoes. And I know people who had their entire family wiped out on the Navajo Nation because of this virus. So I don't know what the right answer is. I really wish, you know, hindsight is everything. Had I known that I'd be sitting here 15 and a half months later, there's probably a lot of things I would have done different. And I think you would probably hear that from a number of members of the council. Because I do think that, especially when it came to our kids, that was the toughest thing for me. The parents that would call, the suicide rate going up. I don't know anybody who was not affected by the suicide rate. I can tell you that I lost some staff and some friends through this, and some of our supporters for my locations. And it wasn't necessarily suicide, but you had drug use increase. You had alcohol increase. And so you had these situations where if people already had depression, it was magnifying that. And I do wish that there had been a closer look at some of those things at the time. And that's what I think that my biggest regret, though, looking back, besides, I wish there was more that we could have done to help small businesses that had been closed through this. And it breaks my heart to know the ones that didn't make it. But I really, really wish that there'd been something more for kids and for the families that were in a different financial situation than my family and your family probably.
All right. Well, we are going to leave it there. Thank you for your candid comments, Carri. Again, your businesses for folks who want to go support you and all the people you've brought back to work.
Well, look, I'm too old for the nightclub too. So, but the Salt Yard, right now our West Side location is opening this weekend. I couldn't open everything in one weekend. So understood. The West Side is opening this coming weekend. We actually done a remodel, made it larger, added more games, really doing more of the family focus that I wanted to do in the beginning. So I'm excited about that. east side, the Osuna location will work on down the road. And then I think that I've made the decision to go ahead and move forward with Yale and do something there by the airport. But that's kind of still in the works as to what I want to do. But I haven't given up on the city, and I haven't given up on the state, even though there are moments during the legislative session that I really believed that our state legislature just really didn't want any small businesses here. But I'm still here, and I'm going to continue to fight.
All right. Thank you, Carri Phillis. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show. Thank you so much.